In this lecture, we're going to be doing a light study. So what this means is just like doing a drawing study, we're going to do the same thing, but only with light. So I've already drawn here this cup that you can see in this photograph, and you can download this entire Photoshop file from the resources of this lecture. So once you have that file downloaded, go ahead and open it up in Photoshop, and you'll see what you have in it is you have the bottom layer, the background layer, which consists of the white area over here and the photograph. And then on top of that, you have this drawing layer, transparent drawing layer with just the lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint on top of this, and we're going to study the light in this photograph and try to translate it into a painting over here on top of our drawing. So what we're looking for is we're trying to capture the same lighting, so the same values, the same reflections, stuff like that. And we're also trying to capture some of the same colors. So if we have a look at this photograph, let's observe it a little bit. So some of the things that I'm noticing is, first off, we have kind of this bluish gray background. It's sitting on a bluish gray table. And we also have sort of it's slightly, ever so slightly yellow, sort of off-white ivory color for the actual teapot itself. And then right here in the opening hole area, it's a little bit warmer. It's kind of an orangish red color, but very desaturated and not very dark. Now, there's a few ways we can test this out. So let's go ahead and use our eyedropper tool, and let's select some of these colors. So if we select in here, you can see that that color, it shows up over here, and the hue is orange. If we select another area, let's select the shadow area right here, and you can see it's sort of an orangish yellow hue. Let's select this bright color here, still in the orangish area. Let's select this over here, and you can see that we're basically staying in the orange area. Now when we come over here into the shadows, you see it gets into the reds, the yellows, and in some areas even starts to get into more of the greens. So we're getting a wide mix of colors in here. So we're getting everything from orange to yellow to green. So those are the colors we basically want to stick around, is orange, yellow, green. Now, if you wanted to, you can go ahead and exactly color pick the colors. So for example, if we were going to paint this highlight right here, we could go ahead and color pick that color, and then we could just go ahead and add a new layer. And using our brush tool, we could just go ahead and paint in that highlight right there where we see it. But that's not exactly what we want to do here. If you have a hard time with this, feel free to do that, but we really want to try to guess and choose the colors ourselves, and that's what a light study is all about. You will learn if you color pick it, but you'll learn more if you try to choose it yourself and change it along the way to make sure that it matches this photograph. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is I just want to take a few samples. So I'm not going to actually use these color picked colors. I just kind of want to see where they land value wise over here. So for example, I want to go ahead and I'm going to select the lightest part. So if I select that highlight area right there, you can see that even though it looks white here, it's just because it's surrounded by darker values. And if you look over here on our color picker tray, it's actually not white. White is clear up there, but it's actually clear down here. So we want to make sure that our brightest color, if we're trying to match this, is not complete white. And then if we go ahead and let's select the darkest color, so let's select right here, you can see it's almost all the way down towards black. Let's go ahead and select this shadow on the table as well. It's almost all the way down towards black. Let's select this color right here. You can see that that is very dark as well. Let's see, we can go ahead and select this color right here. So that's almost a mid-tone gray. That's a little bit past a mid-tone gray. And that is about 3/4 of the way down from white. So this will just give us a good idea of how light or how dark to make certain areas. We can go ahead and check this inside area right here. And that's about 3/4 down from the white. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is I just want to start blocking in colors. So on this new layer I created, you want to make sure that you're painting on a different layer. We're going to go ahead and start painting our teacup. Now, actually, I first want to do the background, and I'm going to do the background on a separate layer, and you'll see why later. So I'm going to go ahead and add a layer underneath our drawing layer. So you can see that that's our drawing layer right there, and underneath it, I just added a new layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by painting in the blue background. So I'm just going to come over here to the blues, and if we remember, we color picked it, and it was pretty dark. It was somewhere down here, and it was kind of bluish. So let's go ahead and let's start painting that in. Now that's looking a little bit too saturated, and I also think it's looking a little bit too blue. The blue that we have over here is a little bit more green, I think. So I'm going to drag this down a little bit, and I'm going to desaturate it a little bit. Somewhere about there should be good. And maybe it could be a little tiny bit brighter. That's actually too bright. So let's go ahead and drag it back down. There we go. That looks like it's matching much better. It could possibly even be a little bit darker than that. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag this down a little bit more towards the greens because I color picked the shadow over here and it's actually a little green. So I'm going to drag this more towards into the turquoise color, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that down a little bit in darkness. And then I can go ahead and start painting in some of the shadow area. Now I'm not going to get too detailed with this right now. We can come back and really detail it out. I'm going to add a little bit of darker area. All right, perfect. So that's good for now. We'll come back and really blend this out and make it look a lot better. We can go ahead and use our erase tool right now. We can just kind of erase that out because we don't want it overhanging over our actual photograph. All right, so now let's come back to our other original layer where we're going to paint the actual teacup. And let's go ahead and begin painting. So if you remember, it was kind of a warmish color. It's not very saturated. It's way more over here towards the gray side, but we want kind of a bright color. So not full white, but it was about somewhere around there. So let's make that our brightest highlight right there and base everything else off of that. So let's go ahead and start painting that in. Now we want to make sure that we're using the right brush for this. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to switch my brush to a hard round pressure opacity brush. So that way when I push lighter, it's transparent. When I push harder, it's darker. And now let's go ahead and let's start just filling in the general area of that bright highlight. So if we look at our photograph, it's just kind of a rectangular shape right there. It doesn't have to be perfect at this point. We're just really blocking out those values. All right, great. Now let's go ahead and look around, see if there's any other areas that are that bright. It kind of looks like we have a pretty bright area right up in here. And right here on this ledge. And it looks like we get a pretty bright area right here down along this edge of the handle. And other than that, everything else looks a little bit darker. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next lightest thing. So we'll drag this down a little bit in our color tray over here. We'll drag it down just a little bit so it's a little bit darker. And let's go ahead and start shading in this top area right here. So you can see that there's kind of a value change right there in that area. So we want to capture that. Go ahead and bring my brush size up just a little bit. And I think the value changes even a little bit more than that. So let's go ahead and darken that even more. I think that's good. And we could probably actually darken that just a little bit more. Especially up here towards the top, it gets pretty dark. Now we don't want to get crazy with the shading at this point or the value changes. We just want to block in the basic values at this point. Something like that looks good. Let's go ahead and use the same value because if we look over here, this value right there and that value right there, they look basically the same. So we can go ahead and color this in the same color for now. Now at this point, if you're not staying perfectly within the lines, that's okay. This is just the block out phase, and the block out phase never has to be perfect. So don't get too crazy about making everything look perfect at this point. We just want to capture the main values and the main colors at this point. And so we're just breaking things up into very rough shapes. So next, let's go ahead and move down here. This is about the same value, this surface right here. So we'll go ahead and we'll just draw that out and then color it in. And even though we get some other values in here, for now we're just going to keep it the same value. All right, great. Next, let's go ahead and have a look around, see if we see another place that has this value. I would probably say that this ledge around the cup has this value. There's some areas where it gets a little bit brighter and a little bit darker, but in general, it has a pretty light value going all the way around it. It's not the full brightness, so it's not like a reflection, but it is pretty bright. So let's go ahead and just fill the entire ledge of the opening of this teapot with this value. Until we get over here, we can blend it into this brighter value where we have a reflection. We'll go ahead and bring it across the top up here. Make sure that you're painting with full opacity. So because we're using a pressure sensitive brush, and if we don't push very hard, it's transparent, we want to make sure we go over it a few times to really fill it in. All right, great. Next, I think we get some of this value just coming right down into this area. And it basically just fills this entire surface right here. So we can go ahead and just kind of fill that in. I'm going to bring my brush size up just to fill a little bit faster. Let's see. Next, let's go ahead and let's fill this top surface right here on the handle. And then the surface right here on the cup, I think is a little bit darker, so let's leave that out. It stays pretty dark all the way down. All right, and then we also get a little bit of a highlight down here on the stand of the teapot, so something like that. It's pretty bright down there. And I think we also get some detail right there, but we're gonna wait till we add the darker value and then we can add that detail on top. We're trying to keep this nice and simple. All right, I think we are ready to go ahead and create a darker value. So we'll go ahead and drag this down. Somewhere about there should be good. And let's start filling in the next darkest areas. So the next darkest areas, I believe, will be inside the cup. So I'm gonna go ahead and just basically paint in this entire surface, except for it gets a little bit darker down towards the bottom. So I'm gonna leave that part out and I can darken it in on the next round. All right, great. Let's see, where's the next place we can fill in? I think next we can go ahead and fill in this top surface on this curved part of the handle right here. Just like that. Kind of get a lighter edge on that side. Same with right here. Then we can kind of go ahead and just fill in this edge right there. I would say that's a good value for that area. And we can fill that all the way over to here. All right, let's see. Next, let's go ahead and let's fill this area right here with the same value. And you'll notice that because this cup is curving like this upwards, and we have a light source coming from here, and we have a light source coming from here, the light source is hitting this surface right here, but this underside that curves upwards is getting hit by shadow, or it's left in the shadow. And so that's why we get a shadow there, and we get a light source or a highlight right there. This is why it's so important to draw studies from real life and paint studies, is because it really helps you understand the real world. You could talk theory all you want, and it's really good to understand theory, but if you don't actually draw and paint from life, you don't really understand it. It's kind of like riding a bike. You can talk about riding a bike, you can learn about riding a bike, but until you actually get on a bike and try it, there's just things that you can't explain. The way the pedals feel on your feet, stuff like that. So you always want to make sure that you're drawing and painting still lifes and studying from real life. All right, now I'm dragging the color down a little bit. I think it needs to be even darker than that. In fact, I think that this part down here could be darker, so I'm going to paint this back in a little bit darker. Like that. And then I'll drag that down even darker, something like that. And I'll fill in this top area. Then I'll go ahead and just kind of let these blend into each other a little bit. I'm not going to work too much on the blending. I'm just not pushing very hard with my brush. I'm just kind of letting those two values blend in together. All right, let's go ahead. Let's take the same value, this dark value up here, and let's go ahead and draw that down here. Perfect. And then we can also start translating some of these values down here onto this bottom part of the cup. So using my eyedropper, I'll just go ahead and select this color right here. And I'm going to paint that in as my next value down here. And then I'll go ahead and use my eyedropper, and let's select one of these colors here in the middle, because it'll be kind of a mix between these two colors and values. I'm going to go ahead and paint that in as the next one. Then using my eyedropper, I'll go ahead and paint this dark value right here, like that. Let's look at our photo. I think we need to bring this dark value out even further, like that. All right, great. Let's go ahead and move on to our next surface. So for our next surface, I'm going to go ahead and let's select this color in between these two where they are blended together. And I'm just going to paint in this surface right here with that value. I think that works pretty well. Great. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag this color down a little bit further, something like that. Maybe actually even further down. If I remember, it's almost a black, so I'll drag it down to about there. And that's going to be our next value. Now, this might look a little bit too dark, but I think it's just because some of the values around it are too light. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to come back in here and darken some of these values. So I'm going to go ahead and just lightly paint that down like this, just transparently, just to blend that into the value below. All right, and then let's go ahead and paint this surface in. We can go ahead and paint in this bottom surface here on the stand. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to lightly paint on top of this area right here. So it's kind of transparent because I want to get a darker version of that. And now I'll go ahead and take my eyedropper and I'm going to select that. And now I can just paint with that, but it'll be opaque. I can push as hard as I want and I still get that same value. And then I'll go ahead and I'm just going to repaint this in because I want it to be darker. Do the same thing up here. All right, great. Next, let's go ahead and paint in this area right there. So it looks like it's about as dark as this area right here. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'm going to select that color. And then I can go ahead and paint this whole side in. And then the surface below it just looks a little bit darker. Whoops. A little bit darker, so maybe right about there. There's not a huge difference between those two values. Maybe a tiny bit darker. All right, there we go. I think that's dark enough. Let's go ahead and paint that in. Then we can go ahead and paint this part in down here. Let's actually make that a little bit darker. So I'm going to select a color from like up here. Maybe even darker actually. So I'll select this color up here, that gray. And then I'll reselect this dark color and just kind of blend that in a little bit. All right, something like that will work. Okay, let's see. So we still need to fill in this area right here. It needs a little bit of a darker value. So we don't want it too much darker. So maybe the color that we just put down on that side, we can go ahead and use that. Let's see how that looks next to it. Even that might be a little bit too dark. So I'm going to go ahead and try selecting this value right there, using that. And I think that looks a lot better. Now another thing I can do is I'm going to go ahead and drag this down more into my oranges. I'm going to drag it over a little bit more saturated because if we look here on our photograph, that area is pretty, it's a little orange. And you can see that I just drew the circle with that color and it actually matches pretty dang well. So we'll go ahead and use that as a base. That's another thing you can do, is test these colors out by drawing on top of your photo and see if you match the colors pretty well. And if you didn't, then go ahead and go back to your color tray and choose a different color. See if you can adjust the values or adjust the saturation or adjust even maybe the hue. And then we can go ahead and bring the size up and just lightly paint in like that, just to kind of help blend it in. Doesn't have to look perfect at this point. We're just trying to block in these values and colors. I think this area right here is a little bit darker, so I'll go ahead and just lightly kind of paint that in, just like that. And then I'll go ahead and use my color picker and reselect this color. So now I have that color selected, so I can push as hard as I want and it repaints it opaque, and I don't get that transparent paint look. I'll just paint that part in. All right, great. So next, let's go ahead and we need to finish painting in the handle. So let's see. The handle has this dark shadow right there. So I'm thinking that the color from right here should match it pretty well. So let's go ahead and use our color picker and select this color. Bring down the brush size, and let's go ahead and paint this area in. I think that's actually looking a little bit too dark, so what we can do is let's go ahead and let's select this color where it mixes in between this light value and this dark value. Let's repaint in with that. I think that value looks a lot better. Paint in this bottom shadow area. And I know it gets a little bit lighter there, but we're just trying to block it out nice and simple. We don't want to make it too complicated. Now we could probably even go ahead and let's select this dark shadow color down here, and let's kind of blend these together. We can brighten this area up right here, and let's just add kind of a stripe of that color next to the dark color, just so it doesn't have such a hard edge. It kind of softens it up and makes it look like it's kind of blended in. Like that. All right, I think it could get a little bit darker, so I'm going to reselect this dark gray up here, and there's a few areas in here that I think could be darker, like right there. Just like that. All right, let's go ahead and zoom out, see how this looks. A good way to kind of gauge your values and the overall shape is to squint your eyes and see how it looks. It'll kind of simplify your image and make it easier for you to see the values, which is really what we want to focus on right now because we're working on lighting. Another thing is go ahead and zoom out really far so you can see it as a small image so you're not looking too close at it. And looking at it, it looks pretty good. I would say that there's one area that I want to work on. So if I zoom back in, I'm thinking that this area right here needs to be a little bit lighter. So let me show you what I'm talking about. This area right here needs to be lighter. So I'm going to go ahead and color pick it, and then I'll just drag that up a little bit so it's a little bit lighter. And then I'll just go ahead and repaint that in. Something like that. Maybe I'll color pick this color, bring that darkness back down into there a little bit more. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and zoom out and check it again. I think another thing too is that I need a little bit more blue in my shadows, and not only that, but I think this right here is a little bit too dark. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and select that color, drag it up a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and repaint that in. So it just lightens it up just ever so slightly. You can hardly tell the difference, but it will make a difference. Do the same thing up here. And this is just going to kind of soften it up a little bit more. Make it look not so harsh. All right, great. Zoom out, see how that looks now. All right, I think it's matching pretty dang well. So next what we want to do is we want to go back in here and we really want to start detailing everything out. And we just want to work in small sections at a time. So let me show you what I mean. So the first thing we can do is we can go ahead and turn off our drawing layer. So you can see that if I turn that off, it changes slightly. You can't see the outline anymore, and that's what we want. So let's go ahead and let's get in there and start painting. So we want to make sure that we don't zoom in too far because we still want to see our photograph as reference. But we can go ahead and start. Let's start on this reflection area right here. So first, let's go ahead and let's just kind of paint in this detail we see here. So it has kind of a design on it. So I'm going to select this color right here. And then I can go ahead and kind of paint that in a little bit. So I'm just going to start by painting a line like that. And then I can just do lines coming down and across like this. Something like that. But then you'll see there's areas right here where the paint connects. And you'll see that there's little holes in it, like right there that I just filled in. And you can see the background through it. And we also want to blend these edges together. So what we want to start doing is we want to start fixing stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and select this color. And then I'm just going to straighten this line out a little bit more. And you might have to select the color on the other side to paint in the other side to really get that straight and get that edge where you want it. Just like that. Now if we look at our photograph, it's pretty soft right there. So we want to soften that up more. And the way we can do that is, let's go ahead and bring our brush size up. The way we can do that is to take this darker color right here or the lighter color and basically paint right over that edge, but don't push very hard. You want to have a transparent paint come out. So if we zoom in there now, you can see there's that little darker, or that little area where these two colors, this lighter one and this darker one, mix together. This is blending. So now we can go ahead and take our eyedropper tool, select that color, and then go back in there with our paintbrush and just repaint that in. And that just begins the blending process. We can do that again with the same color, so I can kind of let it overhang into this brighter area and let it overhang into this darker area. And then I can go ahead and color pick that color and once again blend that in, and do the same thing on the other side. I'll color pick the color right here and I'll blend that into the white, just like that. So now if we zoom out, you can see that we are starting to get a nice blend going back. And we want to just basically continue to do this the whole way. So we're cleaning up edges like this. You'll have to bring your brush size down pretty small probably. Finish out that corner. Straighten out these lines. And then the other thing we want to be doing is we want to be blending these edges. So if we see an edge, so for example right here, this white edge and this darker value down here, that gets a little bit of a blend. It's a little bit fuzzy and blurry. So we want to make sure that we create that. Now right here you can see we already have a little bit of color that's mixing between these two values. So I'll go ahead and just select that. If you don't have that there, you can just go ahead and paint a little bit of the white over the darker value and then color pick that transparent mix. Then we can go ahead and just paint along that ledge, and that mix of the two values just creates that nice soft edge. We also want to go ahead and let's just select this color here and really fill this corner out, just like that. We can also use this value and just kind of start adding more detail to this design here. So for example, if I go ahead and I select this color right here, it's really hard to tell, but this is, you can see that it goes from a darker value and it slowly gets a little bit brighter into this white area. So I'm going to select this color right here, and it should be a little bit brighter than that detail right there. And I can go ahead and just start painting in a little bit more detail and just add a little bit more definition to this stuff. And then if we want to clean this up, we can go ahead and reselect this light white color, and we can just come back in here and maybe thin some of these shapes out, maybe paint a little bit more of a reflection highlight back on top of this darker detail, just to kind of bring it back. We can even take this lighter color and bring it across here. Let's look at our reference. Do we see it there? We actually don't see it very much there, but I'm just going to take the creative liberty to add that in, just because I think that detail kind of helps it pop a little bit more. All right, perfect. So then we can go ahead and move up into this area right here where we need these colors to blend a little bit more. So what I'll do is I'll select this color right here where we already kind of have a little bit of blended colors, and I'll just paint more opaquely with that. Just like that. Start cleaning up this edge right here, and then I'll go ahead and just paint a little transparent on top of that lighter color, and I'll select that, and now I can just paint with that opaquely. And if we look at our reference, we can see that that actually has a pretty hard edge right there. So I want to make sure that I kind of get that. So I'm going to reselect this lighter color and just kind of paint that back in there with a nice hard edge. Let's go ahead and continue blending this in by selecting the middle colors with our eyedropper and just painting transparently, and then reselecting that color and then repainting. All right, great. So this is basically what I'm going to do for the rest of this painting. I'm just going to look at my reference and then try to copy it over here by either blending, finishing up lines, but I really want to pay attention to the values and the shapes of things and paint it in exactly as I see. It's kind of a hard thing to explain. You just have to go for it. And it's a lot better to learn by watching somebody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed up the rest of this painting because it's going to take a while. And you can just watch what I do and study the colors, the shapes, the way I paint. And then I want you to go ahead and finish your painting. so there we go. We just finished our painting. So you should have picked up on a lot of the things I was doing. I was basically using that same technique over and over again, just softening the edges and also redefining some of these shapes and also filling in all the transparent areas. Now at this point, if you wanted to, you could just go ahead and crop this now. So go ahead and just use the crop tool. You can drag it over like that, so you can crop out your actual painting like that. And that brings us to the end of this lecture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.